Shalom in Yeshua's name. I am Dr. Jenkins Sahayam. I welcome you to my Bible teaching series. This topic is entitled The Messiah. Since this topic requires a vast understanding of the scripture to join the various puzzle in the right place, I have split this topic into various parts so as to have a comprehensive understanding of this topic. As my teaching are sequential, if this is the first topic of mine you are listening to, I highly recommend you to listen to my earlier teaching, namely the name of God and the nature of God, before you listen to this teaching. Shalom in Yeshua's name. This is Jenkins Sahayam. You are now watching part 3 of the Messiah series entitled The Chosen Seedline. Before getting into today's topic, let us have a quick recap of what we have covered so far. God created man in his own image. God gave man dominion over all things. Death was never man's destiny as long as he is obedient to God's warning of not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But Satan tricked Adam and Eve to eat out of that forbidden tree. Now the dominion of man is thus forfeited to Satan, who is the king of sin. But God clothed the nakedness of man through garments of skin, which indicated a blood sacrifice. From then on, God accepted only blood sacrifice. God also promised that through the offspring of the woman, which is obviously a human being, the dominion will be restored back to man in the future. Mark of God points to the grace and mercy of God through the sacrifice that is provided to the righteous and wicked alike. But God's plan and promise to restore man's dominion by a seed of the woman, that is, a human being, was tested as a result of mating between angels and human women that resulted in a hybrid race called Nephilim, who were giants. God responded by destroying the whole earth through a global flood, but saved Noah and his family along with specific pairs of all living creatures by protecting them in an ark. Though the Nephilim race were destroyed, some of their genetic evil survived. Mankind had only one language prior to the rebellion at the Tower of Babel. Man's rebellion against God continued, that made God to confuse their language and assign them to other angelic beings and create borders. Yahweh chose a people who are yet to be a nation who would in future understand this divine language and inherit the land he sovereignly chose for himself. In this video, we are going to see how God would choose his chosen seed line. After the whole world was destroyed by the flood, barring Noah and his family, which was obviously saved because of God's grace upon Noah, we find Noah's son Ham earned his wrath on account of his mischief with Noah. This had an impact on the blessing Noah gave for his sons in that Noah cursed Ham's son Canaan to be a servant of servants to his brothers. And he said of Shem that, "Blessed be Yahweh, the God of Shem, and make Canaan be his servant." And for Japheth, he said, "May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and make Canaan be his servant." After this, we find these are the areas where the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth were dispersed. This is the genealogical table of the descendants of Noah, namely Japheth, Ham, and Shem. And we saw the special blessing of Yahweh that Noah prophesied for his son Shem, in whose lineage we find a man named Abram, who will later be called Abraham. Abraham was raised in a pagan family. Now Yahweh said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Yahweh sovereignly chose Abram from mankind to carry out his purpose of fulfilling the promise to redeem humanity and restore the dominion to man by making descendants of Abram into a great nation. Abram obeyed God. He took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot along with him, and he left his father's house and journeyed towards the land Yahweh commanded him to go. During his sojourning, Abram met Melchizedek, the king of Salem, which is ancient Jerusalem, who brought him bread and wine. Melchizedek was also a priest of the God Most High, who blessed him, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth." Now Abram was without an apparent heir, and Abram said, "Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus." Then Abram said, "Look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir." And behold, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, "This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir." Then he brought him outside and said, "Look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them." And he said to him, "So shall your descendants be." And he believed in Yahweh, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. So it was Abram's faith in Yahweh's word that earned him the seal of righteousness from Yahweh. And in Genesis 15, we also see Yahweh making a blood covenant with Abram. So he said to him, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." Then he brought all these to him and cut them in two down the middle and placed each piece opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds into two. And it came to pass, when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, "To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. If you could recollect the genealogical chart we saw earlier, this land belonged to the descendants of Ham, who was cursed by Noah. Then Yahweh said to Abram, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete." So Yahweh said to Abram that it would take another 400 years for his promise to make Abram's descendants into a nation. By the time Abram would die at an old age, and his descendants would be strangers in the land. Why? Because the sins of the inhabitants of the promised land is not yet complete to earn God's wrath upon them. So this is the picture of Abram's journey. He started from Ur of the Chaldeans, and he proceeded towards Haran, and then to Egypt and Canaan. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "See now, Yahweh has restrained me from bearing children. Please go in to my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her." And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. But when Hagar conceived, Sarai started mistreating her out of jealousy, which made Hagar to flee from her mistress Sarai. On the way, the angel of Yahweh met her, and he said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand." The angel of Yahweh said to her, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." And angel of Yahweh said to her, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." Then Hagar called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees." For she said, "Have I also here seen him who sees me?" Therefore the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So by the time Abram left Haran, he was 75-year old when God called him out. And when Ishmael was born, Abram was 86-year old. When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am Almighty God, walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." Then Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and descendants after you. Also, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you, and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations. He who is born in your house or brought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. He who is born in your house and he who is brought with your money must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So Yahweh gave Abraham the eternal commandment of circumcision as a sign of his covenant, which is to be followed not only by his descendants but also the people purchased by him from any foreigner, failing which the uncircumcised male child would be cut off from being the people of God. And Yahweh said to Abraham that Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. So Yahweh makes it clear that though he will bless Ishmael, who is the Abraham's son through Hagar, into a great nation, his covenant, however, will be established only through Isaac, who is Abraham's son through his legal wife Sarah, which means that Yahweh's promise of the offspring of woman who will crush Satan's dominion and restore the dominion back to man will come through the lineage of Isaac. In Genesis 18, we find an interesting episode where Yahweh appeared to Abraham by the terebinth trees of Mamre. As he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day, so he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. So he also took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. And Yahweh promised Abraham that by the time he appears to him again, Sarah, his wife, will have a son. As this chapter progresses, we find Yahweh reveals to Abraham about what he is going to do with Sodom. Interesting enough, he says the outcry of Sodom has reached him in heaven, and he has come to see if the report he heard is true. As the other 2 angels leave for Sodom, we find Abraham mediating with Yahweh to be merciful with his judgment on Sodom. And Yahweh assures Abraham that he will not destroy the righteous with the wicked. So Yahweh went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So there are many interesting things to note here. Yahweh appeared to Abraham along with two other angels as men. They ate food offered to them by Abraham, and Yahweh says that the outcry of Sodom has reached him in heaven, and he has come all the way from heaven to see if the report he heard was true indeed. Now, Sarah has given birth to Isaac, through whom God promised to establish his eternal covenant. But after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Now, it is interesting to note that God, who earlier promised to carry out his eternal covenant through Isaac, now wants Isaac to be sacrificed as a burnt offering. The place is called Moriah, which can be separated into two words, Mor and Yah. Mor is the Hebrew word for myrrh, and Yah is the short form for Yahweh. Myrrh is something bitter, and in short, the word Moriah could mean bitter of Yahweh. But what happened next is the mark of faith on Abraham's part that earned him the title of being the father of faith. As he took Isaac to the place where Yahweh asked him to sacrifice as a burnt offering, and when he was about to slay Isaac, God intervened, and the angel of Yahweh said, Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes, looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the place, Yahweh will provide. As it is said to this day, in the mount of Yahweh it shall be provided. And the angel of Yahweh called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, declares Yahweh, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. What is noteworthy is that Abraham had tremendous faith in Yahweh's ability when he was about to sacrifice Isaac as a burnt offering, because given the eternal promise that Yahweh gave that through Isaac he would carry out his eternal covenant, if Isaac were to die, practically the covenant promise could not take its effect unless Yahweh would resurrect Isaac. So the faith of Abraham is justified through his works as well. Now coming to Isaac. Now there was a famine in the land besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And Yahweh appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt, dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments and my statutes and my laws. Now, when Isaac's wife Rebekah was pregnant, Yahweh said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." True to this, we see in Genesis 25 that the older brother Esau sold his birthright to his younger brother Jacob. Birthright here is something which is looking forward towards God's promised seed through one's genealogy. But Esau didn't have the faith Abraham had. Instead, he sold his precious birthright of inheriting God's promised seed through his genealogy to Jacob for a lentil stew, because without the stew he thought he would die out of hunger. Thus, Esau forfeited his blessing and birthright to Jacob. Now Jacob flees from Esau and he went to his uncle Laban and worked for him. There he also married Laban's daughter Leah and Rachel. As he chose to return to his native with his people, at one point Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of the joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." So this is another interesting thing where Jacob wrestles with a man whom he later felt was God himself. Yet the man allowed Jacob to prevail over him, and he renamed Jacob as Israel. In another episode, we find Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set upon the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, Yahweh stood above it and said, "I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." So we find here that God's eternal promise and covenant to Abraham being passed to Isaac, and from Isaac to Jacob. Now Jacob has 12 children from 4 different wives, Leah being his first wife, whose children are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And the next wife is Rachel, whose sons are Joseph and Benjamin. And Zilpah is his third wife, through whom he begat Gad and Asher. And through Bilhah he begat Dan and Naphtali. Now the rest of the 11 brothers were jealous of Rachel's son Joseph, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites going towards Egypt. But Joseph would go on to become one of the most powerful administrator of Egypt, next only in rank to Pharaoh. In the meantime, there would come a famine in Canaan, but in Egypt, because of God's gift of interpreting visions to Joseph and his efficient administrative capacity, Egypt was surplus with food. This made Joseph's brothers to come to Egypt looking for food, not knowing that Joseph was in a powerful position. Joseph would then reveal his identity to his brothers and invite them to stay in Egypt along with his father Jacob. And Jacob would prophesy that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. So Jacob prophesied that through the genealogy of Judah, his son through Leah, that the ruler's staff would come and the obedience of all people would be to him. And it would happen that after the death of these patriarchs, a new Pharaoh who doesn't know anything about Joseph comes and feel threatened by the growing population of the Israelites in Egypt. He puts the Israelites into severe bondage and at one point ordered every Israeli male child to be killed. It is in these circumstances that Moses was born to a Levite family. His mother, not wishing him to be killed, wrapped him in a basket and set him sail across the river. Now Pharaoh's daughter spotted and rescued Moses, and fortunate enough, Moses' own mother was asked to nurse Moses. And the Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses to be her own son. And it would happen one day that Moses, knowing that he was a Hebrew, kills an Egyptian who was mistreating a Hebrew slave. Later, when that murder came to light to Pharaoh, Moses fled to Midian. Now, in Midian, Moses married a daughter of Jethro, who is also called Reuel. He was a priest in Midian, and Moses was shepherding his flocks. One day, he was attracted towards a burning bush that was not consumed by the fire. As he went close to have a look at it, the angel of Yahweh appeared to him out of the burning bush and informed him about the task Moses is to have, which is liberating his Hebrew people from Egypt and lead them into the promised land of Canaan, which Yahweh promised Abraham. Now, the time of completion of 400 years of sojourning by the descendants of Abraham was drawing near, and the sins of the Amorites as well were piling up to be completed enough to make Yahweh righteously judge by driving them out of the land he sovereignly chose to put his name. Accordingly, Moses returns to Egypt and encountered Pharaoh to ask him to free the Hebrew people. But when Pharaoh didn't comply with it, God responded by inflicting 10 plagues that were aimed at subjugating the Egyptian by their own gods, the last one being the death of the firstborn. These are the 10 plagues on Egypt. The first plague is the river Nile turning into blood. The next one is the plague of frogs. And the third one is with the gnats. The fourth one is with the flies. In the fifth plague, the livestock of the Egyptians were struck dead. The sixth plague was inflicting the Egyptians with boils. The seventh plague was with hail. The eighth plague was with locusts. And in the ninth plague, there was darkness all around Egypt except for the place where the Hebrew people lived. In all these places, the Hebrew people were never affected, which made the Egyptians realize that they were under divine judgment by the God of Israel. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened that he didn't allow the Israelites to be freed. The final plague would be the death of every firstborn that would finally allow Pharaoh to free the Israelites, as Pharaoh's own firstborn son would die. In all the previous 9 plagues, the Israelites were not required to do anything to be saved from these plagues. But during the final plague of the death of the firstborn, every Israelite household was to slay an unblemished lamb and apply its blood to the doorpost of their houses, which would serve as a sign for the angel of death to pass over the house and not strike its firstborn dead. Every other house which didn't have the blood would see the death of its firstborn, so that it happened from Pharaoh's own firstborn to any slave of Egypt whose house didn't have the blood sign, their firstborn was struck dead. Following this deadliest plague, Pharaoh finally agreed to free the Israelites from Egypt. And this started the mass exodus of the Israelites from Egypt towards the promised land of Canaan, which God promised Abraham in 400 years of time. And Yahweh had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. So here we find that the Exodus consisted of not only the descendants of Israel, but also people who were a mixed multitude. And Yahweh supernaturally protected these people and led them in the wilderness through a pillar of cloud by the day and pillar of fire by the night. It happened at one point when Pharaoh changed his mind to recapture the Israelites back. The only option before the people of Israel was the sea, and Yahweh supernaturally split the sea so that Israelites journeyed across the sea on dry ground, with a pillar of God protecting them at the rear from the Egyptian army. But when the Israelites crossed the sea and the pillar of God moved, when the Egyptians attempted to cross the sea, the waters came upon them and destroyed them. After this, Yahweh through Moses gave an important command for Israel in Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Yahweh also told them that the Israelites are to be holy to him, just like how Yahweh their God is holy. Leviticus 20. And you shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. In Deuteronomy 7, we find the reason why Yahweh chose Israel to be his own people. For you are a holy people to Yahweh your God. Yahweh your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples on the face of the earth. Yahweh did not set his love on you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any other people, for you were the least of all peoples. But because Yahweh loves you, and because he would keep the oath which he swore to your fathers, Yahweh has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Therefore, know what Yahweh your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments. And he repays those who hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack with him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Therefore, you shall keep the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which I command you today, to observe them. So what we need to understand from here is that God's blessing would be based upon how you obey his commandments. This is the exact reason why Yahweh revealed that he has blessed Abraham, because he testified that Abraham kept his statutes, judgments, commandments, and the law. In Deuteronomy 9, we find Yahweh warning his people not to be boastful. Do not think in your heart after Yahweh your God has cast them, that is, the inhabitants of Canaan, out before you, saying, because of my righteousness, Yahweh has brought me in to possess this land. But it is because of the wickedness of these nations that Yahweh is driving them out from before you. It is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you go in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations that Yahweh your God drives them out from before you, and that he may fulfill the word which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, understand that Yahweh your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. So here, Yahweh clearly tells the people that they are not inheriting his land because of their merit, but because of the wickedness of the people whom he is going to judge. And also, because of his oath he swore to their fathers, that is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. During their sojourning in the wilderness, the Israelites came to a place called Marah, where they could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? So he cried out to Yahweh, and Yahweh showed him a tree. When he cast it out into the waters were made sweet. And when the people were hungry, Yahweh said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. And the house of Israel called its name manna, and it was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. At one point, once again, the Israelites were thirsty, and Yahweh said to Moses, go on before the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. Noteworthy here is that Yahweh asks Moses to strike a rock in front of which Yahweh would stand, and the rock would yield water. After this, the Amalekites came and fought with Israel in a place called Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill, and so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. After this, Yahweh once again told the people of Israel what sort of a people he is expecting them out to be. "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel." After this, Yahweh called Moses to the top of Mount Sinai and gave him the famous 10 Commandments. These 10 Commandments are just the headlines, the expansion of which would be contained in the Torah, or the first 5 books of Moses. Here are the 10 Commandments. "Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not worship any graven image. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear a false witness. Thou shalt not covet." After this, Yahweh said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, You have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make anything to be with me. Gods of silver or gods of gold you shall not make for yourself. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offering and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you, and I will bless you. And if you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone, for if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it." After this, Yahweh gave a very important command to the people of Israel. "Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions. For my name is in him. But if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries." So it is interesting to note here that Yahweh says that he would send the Israelites an angel, and the important thing to note here is that this angel has the same name as Yahweh. Then Moses went up, also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, which are Aaron's sons, and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. And there was under his feet as it were a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. But on the nobles of the children of Israel he did not lay his hand, so they saw God, and they ate and drank. Yahweh commanded Moses, saying, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. And see to it that you make them according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain." So according to this pattern, the Israelites made the Ark of the Covenant, which was housed in the most holy place of the tabernacle, which served as a sanctuary for Yahweh to dwell. And so it was, whenever the ark set out, that Moses said, "Rise up, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you." And when it rested, he said, "Return, O Lord, to the many thousands of Israel." Yahweh then asked Moses to pour some anointing oil on Aaron's head, and he anointed him to consecrate him to serve as the priest. Here, the word anointed is translated from the Hebrew word Mashiach, from which we get the transliterated name Messiah or Christ. So, what is the reason for the consecration of a priest? Because Yahweh's love to dwell among his people had a problem. While Yahweh is holy, the people were not. So it required a mediator between the people and a holy God before they approach his holiness. Yahweh then commanded Moses to bring Aaron and his sons with him from among the people of Israel to serve as priests for Yahweh. So Aaron and Aaron's son Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar were called by God to serve him as his priests. Not only that, and in Numbers 18 we find Yahweh commanding them, "And you and your sons with you shall guard your priesthood for all that concerns the altar and that is within the veil, and you shall serve. I give your priesthood as a gift, and any outsider who comes near shall be put to death." And when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary as the camp sets out, after the sons of Kohath shall come to carry these. But they must not touch the holy things, lest they die. These are things of the tent of meeting that the sons of Kohath are to carry. Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Let not the tribe of the clans of the Kohathites be destroyed from among the Levites, but deal thus with them, that they may live and not die. When they come near to the most holy things, Aaron and his sons shall go in and appoint them each to his task and to his burden, but they shall not go in to look on the holy things even for a moment, lest they die. You shall also make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it like the engraving of a signet, holiness to Yahweh. And you shall put it on a blue cord, that it may be on the turban. It shall be on the front of the turban, so it shall be on Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things which the children of Israel hallow in all their holy gifts. And it shall be always on his forehead, that they may be accepted before Yahweh. Now it's very important to note that Yahweh gives priesthood as an exclusive right for the descendants of Aaron. So whoever would overrule this would face divine judgment upon themselves without any mercy. Not only that, the priesthood served as a sign of bearing the iniquity of the holy things which the children of Israel hallow in all their holy gifts, which are the blood sacrifices. But not long after, we find that the Israelites transgressed the commandment of Yahweh by making for themselves a golden calf and calling it as Yahweh their God, thus inviting the wrath of Yahweh upon themselves, in which 3,000 people die. Now it came to pass on the next day that Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin. So now I will go up to Yahweh. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Then Moses returned to Yahweh and said, "Oh, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book which you have written." And Yahweh said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now therefore go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin." And Yahweh said, "I will send my angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanite and the Amorite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people." Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought Yahweh went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp of Israel. So Yahweh tells Moses that he will no longer be present among the camp of Israel, for they are a stiff-necked people. So Moses had to pitch the tent of the meeting outside the camp of Israel in order to seek Yahweh. Then Moses said to Yahweh, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found grace in my sight. Now therefore I pray, if I have found grace in your sight, show me now your way, that I may know you, and that I may find grace in your sight. And consider that this nation is your people." And he said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then he said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not bring us from here. For how then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except you go with us? So we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth." So Yahweh said to Moses, "I will also do this thing that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name." And Moses said, "Please show me your glory." Then Yahweh said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim my name Yahweh before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." But Yahweh also said, "You cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live." And Yahweh said, "Here is a place by me, and you shall stand on the rock. So it shall be, while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and will cover you with my hand while I pass by. Then I will take away my hand, you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." We see here the dualistic nature of God. On the one hand, we find him appearing as man to Abraham, but in his glory, he says, no man can see him and live. After this, Yahweh makes an important statement in Leviticus 17:11. "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement by the life." Isn't it interesting to note Yahweh is God. He is a spirit who can appear as man, but he says that he has given his blood upon the altar to make atonement for our souls. Now we can understand the substance of what the blood sacrifices pointed out to. As the Israelites progressed towards the promised land, Yahweh warned them, saying, "You have skirted this mountain long enough, turn northward, and command the people, saying, You are about to pass through the territory of your brethren, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. Therefore, watch yourselves carefully. Do not meddle with them, for I will not give you any of their land, no, not so much as one footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession." And Yahweh also spoke to me, saying, "This day you are to cross over at Ar, the boundary of Moab. And when you come near the people of Ammon, do not harass them or meddle with them, for I will not give you any of their land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as a possession." This is a very important thing to note. God did not command the Israelites to invade every land they see, but only those that Yahweh promised for them. Now, at the edge of the promised land, the Israelites, before preparing to invade the land, sent spies into the land to survey it. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, who are the Nephilims, the descendants of Enoch, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." So the children of Israel, barring Caleb and Joshua, opposed the invasion of the promised land by Israel. This angered Yahweh because of the lack of faith on part of the people of Israel. But Moses interceded for the people of Israel to Yahweh. Then Yahweh said, "I have pardoned according to your word. But truly, as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of Yahweh, because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times, and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who reject me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. Except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they shall know that the land which you have despised. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and your sons shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and bear the brunt of your infidelity until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year. Namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. I, Yahweh, have spoken this. I will surely do so to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and they shall die. After this, Moses got wearied by the constant rebellion by his people and lack of faith, for which he too had to suffer. At one point, the people felt thirsty. With no source of water, Moses prayed to Yahweh. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregations and their animals drank. But Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. If you can recollect, in the earlier situation, Yahweh said he would stand before the rock, and Moses is to hit the rock that would yield water. But this time, Moses only had to speak to the rock which would yield the water. But Moses, in his moment of anger with the people, instead struck the rock twice, forgetting that he was about to strike Yahweh, who would be standing before the rock. And Yahweh had to judge Moses in the most harshest manner by barring him from entering the promised land. Afterward, when the people rebelled again, Yahweh sent fiery serpents that bit them. As a result, when many Israelites started dying, Moses interceded on their behalf to Yahweh. Then Yahweh said to Moses, Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. And it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. And so it was, if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. Here the word serpent is translated from the Hebrew word seraph, which again means a shining one. After this, Yahweh said to Moses, Take Joshua the son of Nun with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and inaugurate him in their sight. And you shall give some of your authority to him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. He shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire before Yahweh for him by the judgment of the Urim. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in. He and all the children of Israel with him, all the congregation. So Moses did as Yahweh commanded him. So Moses didn't enter the land of Canaan promised to the Israelites because of Yahweh's judgment on Moses. Instead, Yahweh asked him to inaugurate Joshua as a successor who would lead the Israelites into the promised land. And from a hill of Moab, God showed Moses the land which he intends to give the Israelites for inheritance. Moses has also prophesied the Israelites that Yahweh your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear according to all you desired of Yahweh your God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my God, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. And Yahweh said to me, What they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. So Moses prophesied that Yahweh will be raising up a prophet like him among the tribe of Israelite brothers, who would one day performs his task. But at the end of the Torah, we read, "Since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom Yahweh knew face to face, in all the signs and wonders which Yahweh set him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all that great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel." So after this, we find the Israelites conquering the promised land under the leadership of Joshua, and this is the map that shows how the Israelites divided the land of Canaan among their own tribes. This concludes part 3 of the Messiah series. Shalom.